What's up, everybody? We have got a new case to discuss that so many of you reached out to me to talk about. So we're going to dive into it today as a 10-plus year investigation has resulted in an arrest. The Gilgo Beach suspect in a series of crimes with a series of victims has been arrested. Name is Rex Heuermann, and it's wild. He's an architect in Manhattan, married with 2 kids, and it seems to be a situation with a lot of circumstantial evidence. He has been charged with 3 counts of first degree M, with lesser includeds like second degree. I have the document here for us to look at. We also are going to hear from his attorney for the first time, his assigned counsel. So it seems like a court-appointed lawyer. We'll see if that changes from somebody that's been an architect for a while, it seems like. And then we will also hear from the prosecution team about their case. So if you are interested in this topic, because so many of you reach out to me about it, it's another sad case with victims here, but at least maybe we're getting towards some justice after, like I said, 10 plus years of an investigation that has come up empty over and over again. But if you are interested in this case, let me know in the comments and let me know by liking the video so we can continue to follow this one. It seems like any case that's 10, 15 years old like this one, there are going to be issues with prosecuting it. Now, the prosecutor says they put their best investigators, best team on it. So, and they feel confident they went the secret grand jury proceeding route. So there are some similarities to some other cases that we're handling, but there are going to be some major differences. It's kind of a mix of Koberger and Delphi, maybe, with the long wait in between, but also circumstantial evidence, also the grand jury proceeding. Some things I think a defense team are going to be able to fight about and poke holes in. But at the same time, this seems like a pretty strong case with circumstantial evidence. It's wild that it's taken this long, but if you think back 2007, 8, 9, 10, technology was very different, but they were able to use a lot of it to get where they are today. So like I said, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, hit the reminder bell if this is a case you are interested in or case you want to know more about or you want us to follow. Like I said, sometimes we'll do opener videos for this as testers to see if this is content you all are interested in. Based on Twitter and Instagram, I would say yes, because I've gotten so many messages about it, like I said, but this is the actual ticket. YouTube is how we actually test to see if you are interested in it. So the first thing I'm going to start with is just so we can put, in case people don't know what this is about, we will just have this up on the screen here, the bail application, which has a lot of details of the case. So first, the charges, 3 counts of murder in the first degree for 3 different victims. I believe at least some of the victims. First off, there's a lot more victims potentially that could be connected to this defendant. Still more to find out about that. They're starting with these 3. Additionally, there's some allegations or thought that some of these women may be women of the night. So there are issues there as well. But they go into the facts and how all 3 women were treated similarly, similar MOs, found in similar locations, wrapped in, what is it? What were they wrapped in? Burlap, belts and things used to tie them up. They were assaulted before the crimes were committed, and an incredibly sad story. Yeah, here's where the victims' bodies were found. And they were all determined to be homicide at the time. Again, there are some more pictures in here and some cell phone evidence that we're going to get into a little bit and show a little bit about. But I think kind of the best way to hear it from both sides at this point, as far as what they know, will be from the horse's mouth, as they say, from the attorneys on the case. So we're going to start with the defense attorney. And this is from JB's stream. So I encourage anybody to go check out JB's stream after this, if you want to see it in its entirety. We are going to watch it in 1.5 times speed to get through as much of it as possible. I haven't watched all this myself, so we're going to be watching it for the first time together as usual. Hit your questions in the comments so I can see what you guys are interested in about this case and what questions you have about this case so I can answer them in future videos as well. So let's get to it. This is Rex Heuermann's assigned counsel.
Attorney, Central Islip, New York. Danielle Coysh, C-O-Y-S-H, is my co-counsel in this matter. We just got appointed on this case. There's not much I can tell you folks at this point in time. You can't hear? Okay. There's not much we can tell you at this point, seeing that we just got involved in this case. I did hear the district attorney outline his case. I will say to you folks that it's extremely circumstantial in nature. In terms of speaking to my client, the only thing I can tell you that he did say as he was in tears was, I didn't do this. We obviously don't have any evidence. This is the beginning.
So right off the bat, this is an incredibly circumstantial case, which usually is a good thing for a defense attorney and defendant. And the defendant said, and my guess is he authorized his lawyer to say this publicly, I did not do this through tears. So he is outright denying it. And again, when you look at his background, it would seem crazy to be able to go through life like this and seemingly live a normal life with a good job and a family and kids and be committing crimes like this over the years. So it's important to note the defendant absolutely denies it. He's presumed innocent. You know, we've gone through this before, so let's just keep that in mind as we follow this case.
Beginning of the case, everybody is presumed innocent in our country. There's a presumption of innocence, and we're looking forward to fighting this case in the court of law, not in the court of press. Tears.
They're looking forward to fighting this case in the court of law, not in the court of the press.
So that's all I can tell you, folks. If you have questions that I can answer, I'm happy to do that on a general level. But again, I don't know specificity, so it would be hard for me to say that now. I don't know that.
Is it exact words where I didn't do this?
Correct.
It was in tears.
Sorry? Well, obviously, anybody who's arrested and charged with 3 murders is, well, I shouldn't say obviously, but he's distraught. He's clearly distraught about the charges here. Yes.
He denied it to you?
Correct.
What were his exact words?
I did not do this.
I did not do this.
Correct.
Do you believe it?
My belief isn't important. Your belief isn't important. It's really about the 12 jurors that are going to be sitting in the box one day, right?
Interesting. What do you believe? My belief is not important. Your belief is not important. It's the jurors that are going to be sitting in the box one day. I mean, would it have been that hard to be like, at this point, I believe him? Would it have been that hard to say that? I mean, I guess this is the lawyerly answer, but I prefer the Mark Eiglarsh type, and this is how I am. I believe him. Unless, of course, you don't believe him, right? If you don't believe him, then I guess this is the right answer. I'm not saying that he doesn't believe him, okay? So don't run with that. I'm not saying he doesn't believe him. Just want to give that caveat because it's there.
You intend to take this to trial?
Absolutely. I mean, if you have an innocent person, you absolutely want to take it to trial.
You say his wife was here today?
I didn't say
Okay,
that.
so he said, if you have an innocent person, you want to take it to trial. Okay.
And he was crying while he said it?
I'm sorry? Again, I don't have these details. I believe he may have been arrested at his house, but I just stepped into this, so I don't know the answer. Manhattan?
What
Okay.
about all the evidence that was provided?
I didn't see any evidence. Did you?
Like all the.
You're talking about the district attorney outlining everything? The district attorney is a very competent prosecutor. He outlined what he thinks he can prove. To me, it was very circumstantial. But again, I haven't seen anything, and I haven't developed the defense. So it's really hard for us to comment. Other than it's important to know that when somebody's charged with a crime, you have to afford them the presumption of innocence.
Have you been in touch with this man?
I just got this case now, so the answer is no.
What is your immediate reaction to the 200 Google searches on the Gilgo case?
I haven't seen him. I haven't looked at him. I can't tell you. Sorry. All right. Yeah, the judge. Yeah, so the judge remanded him without bail, which is understandable under the circumstances. But I don't have any information in terms of risk of flight and the strength or weaknesses of the prosecutor's case to rebut that. So at this point in time, he's remanded, and obviously we'll have the opportunity to make a bail application at a later time.
So he's remanded without bail, meaning he's held. He's going to be in prison for the time being. But he's saying if he can get the fact that he's not a flight risk, ties to the community, not a danger to the community, and that the prosecution's evidence is not too strong for this case, then maybe they'll be able to get him bail. Maybe they'll be able to get him out. I highly doubt it in a case like this where obvious danger to the community is huge. When you have somebody that's potentially murdered multiple people, I highly doubt he's going to get out on bail. But as a defense attorney, they're going to apply for it. They're going to try to get him some bail. Maybe it'll be $100 million or something, but I think he's going to be remanded without bail the entirety of his litigation until trial.
One of the victims' spouses actually spoke earlier today and was talking about the fact that partial justice and she was looking for full justice and was very emotional about it. I mean, given all that and with the DA outlines and everything, do you believe that your client is innocent? The fact you believe
Everybody is presumed.
that he didn't do it?
Everybody is presumed. I don't formulate a belief in my mind as an attorney whether somebody did it or didn't do it. Number one is there's a presumption of innocence, which everybody has to afford him. And number two is whether the prosecutor, the government, can prove their case. So those are really two important things. And I'm not in a position to comment on any of that right now. All right, folks, I'll take 2 more, then we got to go.
Do you intend to remain his attorney? Did he give you any signal that he intends to hire counsel?
I don't know. The judge asked us to take this case pursuant to the assigned counsel plan. I'm happy to take it. And I don't know what his intentions are, but obviously we'll find out.
Usually assigned counsel is different than public defender. So private lawyers can be on the court-appointed list. It sounds like it's like that. I don't know, though. He may just be a public defender, not just be. He may be a public defender. He may be assigned counsel. Either way, it's court-appointed at this point, not chosen by the defendant is what it sounds like.
That out at a later date.
Do you know how his family is doing?
I don't know. I haven't spoken to anybody. I'm sorry. All right, folks, have a great weekend. Take care.
So a big point of that is he hasn't spoken to anybody. He doesn't really have a lot of information. He can't answer a lot of questions. They have not developed the defense. He does not have any kind of like alibi or information from his client that can prove that he didn't do this. And that's where it kind of seems like we're at this point. I believe this is the DA now. We're going to hear him kind of outline the case. I've read through this bail document that has a lot of the details, so I'll probably add some context as we go. If he leaves out any details I think are important, but it seems like they've got a lot of evidence in this case. He'll outline it. I'll add to it. We'll talk about what holes can be poked potentially by a criminal defense attorney throughout the case. But the fact that it's so old is always a big problem in cases like this for the prosecutor. But he seems pretty confident, at least according to the defense attorney.
To announce the indictment of defendant Rex Andrew Heuermann, 59 years of age. He's been arrested by the Suffolk County Police Department's homicide detectives, and he's been indicted in a grand jury presentation by the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office for the murders of Melissa Bartholomew, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello. The investigation of Maureen Brandon Barnes is ongoing. These young women went missing between July of 2007 and September of 2010. They were found in December of 2010 by the Suffolk County Police Department, and then there was nothing, absolutely nothing. For the next 13 years, their cases went unsolved until today. When I took office in January 2022, I made Gilgo a priority. I made Gilgo a priority before I took office. I met with the victims' families, some of whom I'm proud to have standing with us today, and I told them that we were going to handle this case differently. We were going to do it differently, and that when I showed up, you weren't going to see me calling the media and being on Gilgo Beach with a giant magnifying lens looking for clues 12 years after the case. What I was going to do was I was going to work with my task force. We were going to form this task force, and we were going to work together, and we were going to use the grand jury, the power of the grand jury to reach a determination in this case. Because the grand jury has two things. It has power, it has reach. You could obtain documents, you could interview witnesses. But the other thing that the grand jury has secrecy. No one knows what you do when you operate a grand jury proceeding. And we knew that when we were investigating this case and when we dealt with the media or whatever it was we were doing, we were playing before a party of one, because we knew the person responsible for these murders would be looking at us. So we were very careful how we handled the investigation. We maintained the.
So again, I don't know how far he's going to go into this, but he says we knew the person responsible for these murders were going to be looking into us. And according to search results from devices connected to Rex Heuermann, he was doing exactly that. I guess let's just go ahead and do this on the fly. Okay. So let me see if I can find that in this court document. I will spare you the disgusting searches that he had for that was like connected to pornography, which dealt with people being tied up and beat up faces and even children, literally specifically that he searched for. But I will put up on the screen here the searches that he was referencing that this person would be looking for them. So the email account that was also used to conduct an excess of 200 searches between March 2022 and June 2023. So now he said he came in office January 2022, set up this task force. Everybody in the area knew they were cracking down on this. And so he knew that this person would be searching for it because it was all over the news. And guess what? Here are some of the searches in this phone. Now, I'm sure other people in the area searched for stuff around this as well because they were interested, but here is what he found. Why could law enforcement not trace the calls made by Long Island serial killer? Why hasn't the Long Island serial killer been caught? Long Island serial killer phone call. Update 2022. FBI active serial killers. Serial killers by state. Map of all known serial killers. Unsolved serial killers. America's 5 most notorious old cases. 11 current active serial killers. 8 terrifying active serial killers we can't find. And then he searches specifically some of the victims' names. Megan Waterman, Melissa Bartholomew. I know are on the list. I can't remember what the third one's name is. Cops launched Gilgo Beach Homicide Investigation Task Force, mapping the Long Island murder victims. Inside the Long Island serial killer and Gilgo Beach. The Gilgo Beach killer, Criminal Minds. So you see, he was right. This person who they say committed the crimes was watching.
Integrity of the investigation, most importantly most importantly of all, we maintain the secrecy.
Which is also why the grand jury is important. He's right. 300 subpoenas. They did all this work and he wasn't able to know a lot of what they were doing, even though he was searching for it, again, because it was not public. And we've seen that in other cases. And again, stay tuned. We're about to do a deep dive podcast series on how media affects fair trials and investigations.
Of that investigation. And I think that's paid dividends as we've seen today. Now, I think that, when we had the task force, the first thing we did, got together with Suffolk County Police Commissioner Rodney Harrison. We formed the task force. Our first meeting was February 1st of 2022. And what we did, with all of the agencies here, we made the commitment. We were going to take our most talented investigators. So in the district attorney's office, we took ADAs, myself included. We took analysts, we took detective investigators, and they worked on a daily basis with other talented investigators from all of the agencies here. We started that in February 1st in 2022. 6 weeks later, on March 14th, 2022, the name Rex Heuermann was first mentioned as a suspect in the Gilgo case. A New York State investigator was able to identify him in a database. And from that point on, we used the power of the grand jury, over 300 subpoenas and search warrants, looking into this individual's background to bring us to this day. So I'm proud. I know that this case is over, but I'm proud of what we've accomplished up to this point. I know we have more to accomplish, but I'm also thankful for the partnership.
When he says this case is over, he means grand jury indicted, arrested him, holding him without bail. So it's like the first step has been completed.
Of the task force, because certainly without the participation of the task force, we wouldn't be standing here. Before I thank some folks and turn it over to our partners, I just want to talk a little bit about the evidence in the case. I know a lot of people know about the case. As I indicated, the victims went missing between July of 2010 and July of 2007 and September of 2010. In December of 2010, their bodies were recovered. They were buried in a similar fashion, in a similar location, in a similar way. All the women were petite. They all did the same thing for a living. They all advertised the same way. And there were similarities with regard to the crime.
And I believe when he says they all did the same thing for a living and advertised the same way, he is saying they're women of the night. I'm not positive that that's true, so I don't want to call them anything that would be offensive potentially, but that is a similar MO. I mean, literally, how many Law and Order SVU episodes are based on similar things? This is a thing that happens in real life. This is a real life SVU type of case happening before our eyes, yet somebody's gotten away with it for 16 years potentially, because they started going missing all the way back to 2007. And there could be more than 3. It's wild, but it's crazy how long it's taken to arrest a suspect. And that is a big difference between this and Kohberger as well, right? Kohberger was almost immediate. They got the suspect, got him arrested, got everything done. Now, they had the technology of today. In 2007, we didn't have the same technology. So, that's going to make it interesting about this case. And jurors will wonder, why did it take so long? And criminal defense attorneys usually lean into that and use that as part of their defense.
Crime scenes. All the women were bound at the head, at the midsection, or at the chest, and later at the legs. The other thing I think that that's been talked about in the media was they were bound by burlap. That has taken a life of its own in the media, and the burlap has been described or thought to be the burlap that's used at a nursery. That's not the burlap that was used in this case. The burlap was camouflage burlap used for duck blinds of hunting. Obviously it was used to purposely hide the bodies. One thing that became immediately apparent was at the time of each of the murders, the murderer, the defendant Heuermann, he got a cell phone and a burner phone, which is prepaid and anonymous. And for each of the murders, he got an individual burner phone, and he used that to communicate with the victims. Then shortly after the death of the victims, he then would get rid of the burner phone. Right away in December of 2012, FBI CAST analysts, special agents with the CAST unit of the FBI, they immediately began looking at that cell site data. They compared the victims' phones with the burner phones, and they immediately honed in on some similarities, specifically in the Massapequa Park area. And they looked at an area of a confluence of 4 cell towers, and they realized that this had significance because the perpetrator of these crimes was probably located within this area at or around the times of the murder.
So again, we are going to have a lot of cell phone data. It's a burner phone, which makes it more complicated, but I assume they're going to be able to connect it to Heuermann, the suspect in the case. But there's also what's interesting, and he may mention this, but I read this in the documents, that when each of these crimes were committed, Rex Heuermann's wife was out of town in Maryland and Iceland. She was not in town. So if he goes and picks up a female and commits these crimes and buries them in similar fashion, when your wife's out of town, obviously a lot easier to do something like that. So again, just this is the circumstantial case being built and stacked on top of each other. No one thing necessarily proves it perfectly, but there's a lot more evidence that I believe he's going to talk about.
And that was mapped out. That was called the box, and it was an area in Massapequa Park. The FBI also managed to do that for an area in Midtown Manhattan. And so that was an investigative lead. The other investigative lead at the time was, even though there was a significant amount of time that elapsed with regard to before the victims were recovered, there was some significant evidence recovered. Specifically, there was a hair recovered from Maureen Brainerd Barnes from a belt buckle that was around her legs. With regard to Megan Waterman, there were 3 hairs recovered from her, one from around her head area, one from around her leg area in the burlap, and then there was one caught in between the tape. And that was recovered. Amber Costello also had a significant hair that was recovered during the time of the recovery. But again, the crime scene, because it was out there for so long and because it was exposed to the elements, those hairs were degraded, so you couldn't use traditional DNA analysis.
That's what I was just going to say. I mean, because they're so old, what type of shape was the hair in? How reliable is the DNA going to be from that? We'll see that they connected the female hairs to, or they couldn't exclude Heuermann, Rex's wife, 99 point whatever percent. They could exclude everybody else, not her. And with the male hair connected to Rex, same thing, 99.96% chance that it was his. So, these DNA results seem like a lot, but I think they're less than some other cases. And I think there's going to be some ways to argue against them. We shall see, of course, once the defense gets a chance to prepare their case.
On it, you would have to wait and use mitochondrial DNA. And back in 2010, the technology wasn't there for mitochondrial DNA. So
which is a very common thing that happens when the old cases get cracked. Now, the mitochondrial DNA, the technology changes. We have it now. We didn't have it back then. That's always a good explanation as to why this was able to happen 16 years later, but not way back then in 2007. They didn't find the bodies till 2010. So really 13 years.
Investigation proceeded, but also technology proceeded as well. And then in January and February of 2022, we formed the task force. We began working collectively. And then a mere 6 weeks later, on March 14th, 2022, Rex Heuermann was identified for the first time. And the manner in which that was done was the New York State investigator looked at a database. Amber Costello, the day before her disappearance on September 1st, 2010, she met with an individual for the purposes of having him pay her money for her services. But she involved herself in a ruse where once the individual gave her money, and other individuals came into the house, pretended to be significant others, confronted the individual with the purpose of making that individual uncomfortable, having him leave without retrieving his money. And that's exactly what happened. So that individual was identified as a person who was between 6'4" and 6'6", a large man, thickly built, not necessarily overly muscular, but just a naturally big person with glasses, white, and dark hair. Also of significance was that
there was an encounter with one of the victims prior to the day the crime was committed, and she was with the same person she was talking to on the phone as she was with the night when the crime was committed, and somebody else that is still alive was a witness to her encounter with the man the night that she left alive, and then they met up again later. But that man was described as 6'4" to 6'6", white with glasses and brown hair, and that's exactly how you would describe Rex Heuermann.
Fact that he was driving a dark-colored black first generation Chevrolet Avalanche with a very unique feature that was between it was a pickup truck, so it was between the cab and the bed, and that was identified. Again, that was back.
If you remember what those Chevy Avalanches looked like, they didn't look like a normal pickup truck, and that turns out to be Rex Heuermann's car. So again, that witness connects Heuermann to that car.
In 2010, but it wasn't until March of 2022 that database was searched by the task force, and this individual was identified. That individual was Rex Heuermann, the defendant. And right away, there were some commonalities that came right to the fore. Rex Heuermann, 6'4", largely a large person, not necessarily muscular, but a very physically large person. He has glasses. He has the dark hair. And also, a particular note, he owned, at the time, that first generation Chevy Avalanche. There was more. He lived at 105 First Avenue, which was located within that box area that the FBI first discovered in 2012. But there was more. Also, he worked at the time at an architect, he owned his own architectural firm at an address at 19 West 36th Street in Midtown Manhattan. And that was also the area of interest that was identified by the FBI in 2012. Again, that was March 14th, 2022. And from that point on, our partners and my office, we used the grand jury to continue to investigate. And we executed over 300 subpoenas, search warrants pertaining to this individual to find out more information. One of the things that we did is we followed him because we wanted to get an abandonment sample of his DNA, which we were able to do. We also got DNA samples, abandonment samples from his family.
Abandonment sample means when you abandon your sample, and apparently they got his DNA from some crust from a pizza that he threw in a trash can that they can prove was his crust. They get that DNA. That's how they connected it to the hairs. Same thing with his family. They got it from abandonment samples, which is exactly what you'd call how they got the Koberger sample. So you're seeing an MO and how these investigations happen and how, you know, these alleged criminals have to be careful. And as soon as they're not for 1 second, boom, this is how you get caught.
Family. And then we went back and we got mitochondrial DNA testing. And with regard to, there's an aspect of New York State law that doesn't allow me to talk about DNA testing, specifically at press conferences. So I can't do that. However, at the arraignment and also when we filed our bail letter, we talked about the significance of that evidence. So if anyone needs to see that, but suffice to say, that evidence was significant, especially with regard to the other evidence that we had developed. But there was another interesting aspect. We looked at the Heuermann family travel records, and we learned that during the murders of the last three women, Bartholomew, Waterman, and Costello, that during the commission of those murders, the defendant's wife and children were out of New York State, and he was alone in the tri-state area. We also went back and looked at his cell site records, and we compared his personal cell site records with that of the 4 target phones, and we saw that there was areas of commonality. In other words, that whenever the target phones would bounce off a cell tower, if the Heuermann personal phone bounced off a tower, it was always consistent and in close proximity with the target phones. And at no time was there. So
again, close proximity, he's using words. And again, whenever a lawyer explains their position, you should be with them. Be like, yes, I'm with you. I will vote with you. But there's nobody cross-examining him. There's nobody bringing evidence against him at this point. So we're just listening to him, but he's using words like close to, similar to. If they compare those two phones together, yeah, that's great evidence. But if they're 2 different cell towers, then they're going to have to explain, well, you know, sometimes it doesn't always bounce off the closest cell tower. We've already heard expert testimony like that in other trials. It's an imperfect science. It's not an exact location. They have maps throughout the document, which I can show here again, that kind of show how we look at, you know, how cell phones are used and how the target area is here with the target cell phone. And it's a pie, a piece of the pie, and it can kind of go out here and it doesn't necessarily mean this. And then they have, you know, how close the victim's phones were to his office and his house. And again, victim's phone, how close they are to the locations where he is. So again, they have a lot of explanation of how the cell phone stuff will be used. The cell phone evidence will be used as evidence against him, all in this court document, this that he was discussing there. We're talking about the DNA. They also talk a lot about the DNA testing. But it's an inexact science. It's an imperfect science, but it is really an important piece of circumstantial evidence to show they are similarly situated in the same places. And he's texting them on days when his wife and kids are out of town. When he's at his office, he's closest to where the victims are. That's when the burner phones are in the same location as to where his office is and in close proximity to where the victims are. The way it's set out in these court documents, I mean, it is a very strong circumstantial case. If this was not a 10-year delay, I'd feel more confident about it from the prosecution side, but that adds a wrinkle, no doubt.
Ever an incident where those target phones were, for instance, in New Jersey while the defendant was on Long Island. So that was completely consistent. The other thing that we looked at was we looked at his use of burner phones, and we followed, using the grand jury, using the great investigative help from our partners, we followed his use of burner phones. We were able to identify 7 separate burner phones that he used. We were able to use fictitious or fraudulent email addresses and get Google warrants. And from there, we got his searches. And we learned what the defendant was searching. In a 14-month period, he had over 200 searches pertaining to the Gilgo investigation. Not only was he looking at investigative insight, He was looking, trying to figure out how is the task force using cell phones to try to figure out what's happening. What are the developments with regard to the task force? And this really supported our decision to keep our investigative focus secret, because we knew that this one person would be watching, and we didn't want to give.
Search results to me are like some of the most damning stuff because, again, it is using someone's own words against them. And we talk about that so much that is literally the best evidence. And they also have these pictures here in the court documents about how here he is, the defendant. So they also just have like some selfie pictures of him from some of his phones. But then also here he is going into cell phone stores, paying cash, as you can see, for more minutes and burner phones, because he, has a MO of using burner phones. So again, that's all important. And then also they have these pictures of, that's the pizza box thrown away in the trash can. That's the pizza that apparently they got his DNA off of. So again, well documented. I mean, for a circumstantial case, again, I think they're really putting it together well, but it's still a circumstantial case, which I think is a little more difficult. Obviously, most cases are circumstantial though, so it's not exactly a surprise. And I think they're doing a good job. I think the delay in the 10 years is kind of the bigger hurdle for them to clear.
Give him any insight into what we were doing, and we also didn't want him to know just how close we were getting. So we maintained the grand jury secrecy, and we maintained the integrity of our investigation. In addition to those Gilgo searches, he was compulsively searching pictures of the victims, but not only pictures of the victims, pictures of their relatives, their sisters, their children, and he was trying to locate those individuals. In addition to that, there was a lot of torture, porn, and what you would consider, depictions of women being abused, being raped, and being killed. In addition to all of that, we continue to look.
Yeah, those are the search results I spared us from going through, but they're bad. I'll just tell you, they're bad. That alone is criminal. I mean, if they can prove he did that, it's going to be tough for a jury to be like, nope, this guy can go. Again, the generally bad guy rule. If you can show the kind of searches this guy was doing, generally bad guy clicks.
And we were able to determine that Chevy Avalanche that was used during the commission of the Amber Costello crime, that Chevy Avalanche was in South Carolina. And again, with the help of our partners, we were able to seize that Chevy Avalanche pursuant to a search warrant, and we're certainly going to analyze that. In addition to that, pursuant to the arrest of the defendant last night by the Suffolk County Police Department, we obtained one of his burner phones, his last burner phones. As I said, this case is not over, it's only beginning. We're continuing to execute search warrants, and we anticipate getting more evidence. Before I turn it over to my partners, I want to thank a lot of people in the room. First and foremost, I want to thank the victims in this case. It's always inspiring as a prosecutor when you get to meet the victims. And while sometimes our defendants could embody the very worst of humanity, it seems that invariably our victims embody the very best of what it means to be human. And in this case, it was no different. I've gotten to know the families, and I'm inspired by them, and I'm impressed by their patience and by their dogged persistence in not only supporting their lost sisters or mother or daughter, but also really standing for victims everywhere. So I want to thank them all so much, and I want to let them know that we're going to continue to work this case. The next thing I want to do, I want to thank our partners. I want to thank Suffolk County Police Commissioner Rodney Harrison. Rodney did go before the meeting.
Everybody that's involved in the case. We heard
various
about the victims, but
nothing to do with the investigation or any of the agencies that were actually handling the investigation. They still asserted pressure. I know that we have Suffolk County Homicide here, Kevin Byer, who's one of the reasons why we had to take this case down was we learned that the defendant was using these alternate identities and these alternate instruments to continue to patronize sex workers.
Oh yeah. So another thing they said was like he would call the victims' families after and taunt them. And I think they believe he's connected to some other murders, but that's still to be decided. But they have in the document as well other email addresses that they can prove he created based on the phones and the computers and the IP address and the locations that have some of these searches that have more damning information on them, but they feel they can connect them to him, even though it's totally different names. But there are ways of proving things like that.
Which of course made us very nervous. But with the help of the sheriff and his database and his analysts, we were able to continually stay one step ahead of the defendant. So thank you, Sheriff Toulon. I want to thank the FBI. I know Assistant Director in Charge Michael Brodak is here. I want to thank his entire team. You know, when you have the FBI, not only do you have tremendous resources and insight, whether it's the behavioral sciences unit, whether it's CAST, whether it's CART, which is their computer unit, but you also have the ability to seize a car in South Carolina. I can't seize a car in South Carolina without the FBI. So thank you for that. And thank you for your partnership. And thank you. I know Major Udis is here and his team. This case is emblematic of great cooperation, but we always get that same level of cooperation from the state police, no matter what case we're working. So I want to thank them. Their investigators did great work on this job and in this case. And we, this case, as I said, spans 13 years, and during that time, Pat Ryder has been our neighbor to the west. When it started, I think he was a sergeant. Detective sergeant, maybe uniform sergeant, but whenever we needed something to be done, or whenever the task force needed something to be done, Pat Ryder would do it, and he would do it quietly without much fanfare, and we know he would keep the confidentiality of our grand jury and our investigation. So I want to thank him for that. And with that, I will turn it over to Commissioner Rodney Harrison.
Good afternoon. Today is a good day. And before I acknowledge the individuals that had a role in getting to this place, I would first and foremost like to offer my deepest condolences to the family members. To the family members of Amber Costello, Melissa Bartholomew, Megan Waterman. I can only imagine what you had to endure over the last decade regarding knowing that your killer was still loose. God bless you. Police commissioner, it's nearly about 2 years now, and I've had that investigative experience in NYPD as a detective, and I wanted to let it be known that this was going to be our #1 priority.
All right, I think we've gotten through all the evidence in the case. And again, check out JB's stream if you do want to go over more specifically what everybody else had to say that had a hand in the investigation. But he did a pretty good job, obviously, summarizing the case. He knows it better than any of us ever will because, in fact, it is his case. So also some other examples is the defendant Heuermann was searching and viewing articles concerning the literal task force that was built to investigate this crime. So he was very interested in it. Again, a lot of you that have reached out to me and said, this is in my backyard, I've been interested in this, I've been following this, you may have these similar search terms. You may have viewed these same articles. So this on its own would not prove that he did it, right? We know that. That's not what we're saying. But when you have the circumstantial evidence, you continue to pile up. That is where the state gets over the probable cause, over the holding him without bail. That's how they get over all of those burdens at this point. They haven't proven the case beyond a reasonable doubt, but they have provided enough for the grand jury to indict and for a judge to hold him without bail. And to me, it seems like there is plenty of evidence here in this document. Now, they still have to prove it. There could be issues. Like the defense attorney said, they haven't had an opportunity to go through everything. They haven't had an opportunity to figure out what their defense is going to be, even talk to their defendant. But he says he did not do this. So 10 years, defendant denying it, circumstantial case, DNA that's 10 years old and had to wear through the elements, cell phone records from burner phones, inexact. But you start piling that on. You get the defendant's own statements with his search results. You get some generally bad guy stuff piled on top with some of the pornographic search results with abuse and children in it. You pile that on with his wife and kids were gone in the date ranges that these crimes were committed, and it starts to look a lot worse for Rex Heuermann. But we'll see what can be proven. We'll see what sticks. We'll see what proves to be admissible and reliable evidence. But let me know what questions you have. What do you have? What do you not know about this case, or what's interesting to you about this case, or what do you want me to dig into more about this case specifically that makes it different from some other case that we're covering? Procedurally speaking, it's a new state that I don't think we have a case that we've talked about in there yet. So that can always make it interesting, but let me know. Help me out with what content you want around this case. So many of you reached out, so I had to deliver. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments what you thought, and please hit that like button on your way out. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok at Tragos Law is our handle. And don't forget to listen to the Lawyer You Know podcast, featuring new episodes every week. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, the Lawyer You Know.